you didn't get to see your test, but I'll tell you the ones that I have graded, just right here on top. Tommy, Christina, Christopher, Brian, Fritz, Hannah, Cody, Alexandria.
Make sure you do not log off this computer when you're done, like you upload it.
Talia? Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, you might want to get here early.
This is my
Gary,
account, so.
Tommy, oh yeah, true. He's so helpful. That's the ones that are completely graded. The others are partially graded, and again, if you're dying, I'll grade them pretty fast for you. Okay, so anyway, I guess he said we're recording. All right, so we're recording for Fort Knox because you guys, I think are having, another technical issue of some sort. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna start like I always do. We're gonna bring up, let's see, we had ended with feudalism, the description, so we're gonna go through that just a little bit.
Yeah, we were
Because
on
there's
like
more-
this magical living little sharp thing.
Yeah, because there's more that we're gonna do with that, and we're also gonna have today, people that are not here, we're not gonna have PowerPoints for chapter 8. I don't know if you remember that, but you know, if they're not here, I guess it's gonna be something that they're gonna have to figure out, because we don't have PowerPoints for chapter 8. I do that intentionally because, you know, I've got reasons that from studies over the past few years that have come out about PowerPoints and their, you know, effectiveness. So anyway, I try to vary it sometimes. Anyway, we're gonna end, you know, what we were doing, we're gonna end, and then roll into chapter 8. Chapter 8 will have no PowerPoint. I'll probably go ahead and put chapter 9 up, and then your exam, let me go ahead and switch over to this right here. The exam, I just mentioned to you guys, I'm not all that terribly upset about giving you another I may start just giving everybody all take-homes from this point on, because it doesn't make a darn bit of difference. I mean, it really doesn't, so, I'm using hyperbole. In other words, I'm exaggerating. I'm probably not gonna do that, but I am going to at least give you guys the next test is gonna be take-home also. The only one that we're gonna have in class from this point on is during finals week. It'll be the last exam. Okay, so is that good? Yeah. Right.
Do you know when the final's gonna be in the fall too?
I would have to look it up. I don't know it off the top of my head. This was 7, 8, and 9. This exam is exam 3, and this one's gonna be posted online, just like that last one. Those of you, one of you that made 101, do what you did before. Those of you that made a 50 or a 60, try something different. I don't know, maybe open a book. I don't know. Just a thought, maybe, possibly. I'm sorry, I'm snarky. I get snarky a lot. You guys gonna know that I don't mean anything. I love you. I love you. But anyway, it's also not personal. I say this to every class almost verbatim. Now, the other thing is, it's almost rehearsed, but the other thing is, when it comes to internet, please don't Google search this stuff. And good gosh almighty, if we mentioned Gregory of Tours once, we mentioned him 75 times in this class, did we not?
Yes.
The author of what was the book?
The History of the
History of the Franks. And I got people that obviously were going on the internet, you know, Googling it, and they gave me this, you know, the big French version of his name, and I was like, really? After it was on like 5 PowerPoints, you're gonna go Google it, when all you have to do is have your PowerPoints right in front of you. Don't make things harder on yourself. You don't have to Google crap. It's in your notes, it's in your book, it's, you know, in the study guide. Don't go looking for extra trouble, okay? Go by what we've talked about in class. Otherwise, you're gonna be, a lot of times, you're gonna be inundated with stuff that you won't know what information's important, what information's not. Go with what we talk about, because we could dig a whole, you know, tunnel with the amount of information on some of these guys. So anyway, this one's gonna be posted online. Did I say the 16th?
Yes.
Okay. So it'll be posted like, you know, on November 16th, which means it'll be due. Let me look up here at my handy little calendar. Do you know Thanksgiving is next week?
Yes.
Okay, so that means it'll be due on the 21st. Due, I want it in person for you guys that are here. Shh, quit chattering. You guys, it's either there or there. It's never back there though. Terry's quiet. Look here now. Pay attention to this. I want it due, if you guys are here in person, I want it due in person, hard copy, at the first of class on Tuesday.
So
Okay.
basically, print it out.
Tuesday, 21st, just like before. Yeah, print it out.
And type
Bring it
the
in.
essay.
It'll have directions on there, but I'm thinking, yeah, prepare this time to type the essays. I didn't count off for that because, we talked about circumstances and stuff. So this will be due next Tuesday. Then you have Thanksgiving. There's no classes on Wednesday. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you have a long little Thanksgiving break. And then we come back and we literally only have, 2 days left. So what we're gonna cover at the end is gonna be, and I'm finalizing this now, before I said it would be chapter 10, maybe a little 11 introduction, but it's gonna be chapter 10 only, it's gonna be during finals week. Now somebody asked when, it's not on the top of my head because I have too many classes, however, it's very easy for you to find, let me show you. You can go to the school website, right here, and if you go under academics, this is where you can find the calendar for all, the semesters and everything. But also right there is the final exam schedule. Now, here's the thing, pull it up, it's the same for spring and fall, because it's based on the time of your class. And then it's based on, the days of finals week. Let me also pull up another thing so we can look at both together. This is something I heard Katrina Eicher teaching them in, in the FYE class the other day. This is really helpful. This is really helpful information. Okay, now, right here we have our academic calendar. So we go down here and we see, college closed, 23rd, 24th, and then we have a, holiday here and all of that. So you've got that time off. Now, right here, December 1st is the very last day that you can actually drop a class because final exams are December 4th to 10th, okay? So if we look at our calendar over here, we see that that's the week, here's Thanksgiving, and then here's the week where we're gonna have Tuesday and Thursday. That's all we got, those two after we come back. And then this week is final exams week. So if you have a teacher who's giving a final exam or a final test during final exams week, they have to follow the schedule, okay? There's a reason why we have the schedule, and I've had to throw down with a couple of them every now and then that want to get cute and decide that they're going to not follow the schedule, and I win every time because I go by that. Okay, I took it all the way to the president one time and said, what are we going to do about this? President said, we're going to go with what's printed, and I said, thank you very much. So right here, your class, okay, whatever class you have, if they're going to give a test during finals week and they tell you some jacked up time that is not on here, that conflicts with a class that goes by this schedule, don't be afraid to tell them, no, I've got a test that goes on the schedule. Especially if it's my test, because I will stand up for you, okay? So, you guys, we have class at a kind of a strange time here, okay? Because we've got, let's see, Tuesday, Thursdays, and it's actually 1:30. So I haven't actually looked at this yet. Let's see, 12:30, 1:30, 5:30. Because what happens? Let's say you have a class that is 10:30 to. Let's see. Yeah, the 10:30. That's what it is. I haven't looked at this like a semester. Okay, so ours is the 1:30 one. Okay, there it is. First Tuesday, 1:30, so it's 1:30 to 2:45. Okay, so Tuesday. That means that your final exam is not exactly at the same time as your class. It's a half hour earlier, but you have a block of time from 1 to 3 for us, for this class. Okay, so if you have a class that meets Tuesdays, the first day of its meeting was a Tuesday at 1:30, which is us, then it's at 1 o'clock on the day of finals week, which would be December 5th. Now, here's the thing. It's the block of time is from 1 to 3. We start at 1. If you wander your happy self in here at like 2:40 or something, we're going to be, I guarantee you, long gone. because it's no longer than any regular test. It doesn't mean that we have to sit and wait for you to get here at 10 minutes till 3, okay? Test starts at 1. Okay, so you'd be here at 1, you take the test, and then you're done. And that's the one I was mentioning that only covers chapter 10. Finals exam week.
Will it be in the shirt?
I presume so, yeah. I don't think there's another room open that we can move to. I'd rather have it probably in a different room, but it'll probably be here. Fort Knox, you guys, if you're listening or hearing this when it's recorded or whatever, I'm gonna have to make arrangements for you guys to figure out when to take that test and so on. Okay, so anyway, this works for all of your classes. That's the official final exam schedule. Our exam is not a true final because it does not cover everything, but it is held during finals week, so I must go by that schedule, okay? Now, again, there is the finals week from the 4th to the 10th. They count Saturday. So that means that on December 5th, that'll be your test in here at 1 p.m. from 1 to 3. If it takes you that long, and it won't, it's no longer than any other test. Okay, so I'll go ahead and put it down here, December 5th, 1 o'clock p.m. to 3. Somebody will forget that, and you'll come wandering in at 1:30. That's fine, that happens, but if you want to actually be here and get it done, start on time, write it down, because you'll forget. If you're like me, you'll forget the time. It'll be a little bit different. Okay, let's get started.
What do you have like a class that you used to
You do
start-
not.
No,
You're in
no.
finals week.
Well, I was supposed to say, I have, me and her have a sociology
We don't have a
class.
class that week though.
You don't have regular classes during finals week.
Hmm.
You don't have them. That's the purpose of finals week. That's why they staggered them, so they don't conflict with each other. One time I had it was 8 or 9 a.m. chemistry class, and the final was given to us at 6 that night. And that was in a different state, a different time, in a different
Okay.
world, but they do that. Finals weeks are weird. Finals weeks are just weird. Ours are a lot less weird than any of the colleges I've been to or taught at, because they're sort of close to the right time. But anyway, yeah, you're not gonna have any conflicts unless, as I said in a very joking, snarky way, unless someone gives you some kind of jacked up time that's not on the finals schedule, you're not gonna have any troubles. It'll be smooth. And to be perfectly honest, there's a lot of these professors that don't use finals week at all, which makes me look like a bad guy. But I'm using it because I need the class time, and you deserve the class time. Whether you want it or not, you deserve it, darn it. Okay, now, back to feudalism. Anybody have anything else, though, before we continue forth? Okay, so we kind of started this whole little feudalism thing last time. We I wanted to give you a little bit of information before we go into chapter 8. And again, feudalism is very broad, but the kings are set up to be at the top. They're figureheads for the most part, generally during medieval times, especially during the Dark Ages, especially during the period from about 500 to about 1000. Now again, kind of started doing this, that like under the king, we're going to have, say, these powerful guys. I'm drawing it just a little bit differently than last time. We're going to have this guy right here, and this guy right here, this guy. These are going to be lords who are very powerful. Okay, now, each of these lords is probably, because they are powerful, going to have men who are under their control. Now again, it might be 4, it might be 10, it might be 100. Okay, these guys right here, each one of these is called a vassal, okay? Each one of these is going to be called a vassal. Now the way this works, and again, you can draw as many little lines as you want to, but what I want you to understand is you have someone who becomes a lord by swearing. Remember, we wrote this down also, fealty. This is an oath, a Germanic, Frankish, and even Roman Catholic Christian type of oath, where you're going to get some land, because what you've done is you've sworn your allegiance to someone above you. So these guys right here, these lords right here, and there may be 4 of them, there may be hundreds of them, who knows, it depends on time and place. And anyway, this guy right here, let's just talk about, say, one particular guy at a time. That makes it maybe a little clearer. This dude right here, this guy right here, he has sworn, let's call him John, okay, from John of Gaunt. Which reminds me, please tell me you're doing the last night
Oh,
paper,
I'm
right?
almost done on the politics part.
Good, good. So here, this guy right here, he has sworn his loyalty or his fealty to the king directly. So the king is his overlord. Now this guy has got other guys that have sworn fealty to him. So this man right here, John over here, he is at one time the vassal to the king, as is this guy and this guy and this guy, because they've sworn their loyalty directly to the king. This guy, John, right here, he's going to have many other guys under him, swearing fealty to him. These guys are the ones who are called vassals, but they could also be lords. So let's talk about this guy. Let's call him Bob, okay? So we got John over here, and we got Bob, very non-medieval type name. But this guy right here, this man is going to be the vassal when we come to his position regarding his relationship to John. Okay, so John up here is his lord. Now, Bob down here, he's going to have some other guys. He's going to have some vassals under him. In that case, he would be known to them as their lord, right? So to this one right here, let's call this one Joe, okay? Joe is going to, he's going to actually refer to Bob up there as his lord. Bob's going to refer to him as his vassal, okay? So you see the way it works is each one of these vassals can have more and more guys under them in this process we call subimputation. And again, you can see if you take that out exponentially, how it could easily multiply, where you're going to have John up there, or even Bob over there, even Joe. Any of those guys could have a lot of other guys under their oath of fealty, and they could call on them for help, okay? So we talked about all of that, and basically we're going to talk a little bit more about the obligations of the lords and all of that. But then let's go down here. First, up here, these guys are the nobility. These are the nobles, okay? The king is the highest noble of them all. The lords and vassals are going to be the nobles. Down here, I feel like this is probably about where we left off. Okay, we've got the commoners. Okay, so the commoners we're going to break up into a couple of things. Okay, first of all, we've got the peasants, and we've got the townspeople. Okay, these are two different groups of commoners, and it's a reference to where they live and how they live their lives, generally speaking. Now, the townspeople and the peasants, one thing really separates them. The townspeople obviously live in some sort of a village or a town or a city. These are going to be the people who are, say, the merchants, the artisans, the craftsmen and so on. These are going to be the blacksmiths and whoever's working in that town, running the shops, owning the shops and whatever. Now, the peasants are going to break into two different groups, okay? We're going to have the free men, and then we're going to have the serfs. Now, this is, again, my interpretation of this, because you have other interpretations. Like in your textbook, they go into this thing about unfree and free serfs and whatnot, and I'm like, well, I don't like that, because by definition, serfs are indeed unfree, because they're bound to the land. So what's the distinction? Okay, here's the distinction. Free men are going to own some land. Okay, they're going to own some of their own land, maybe a couple of acres, but they own some land. Okay, the serfs are going to be bound to the lord's land. What they would say is the serf is bound to his land, but in reality, the serf is bound to the land of his lord. Okay. Now, what they both do, I mean, the whole idea, when we talk about peasants, the whole definition of peasantry is not how you sometimes hear it used today. Okay. The whole idea of peasantry is commonly going to refer to farmers. okay? So the peasants, these guys are gonna work the soil. These are farmers, whether they're free men or whether they're serfs, they're farmers, okay? They're working the land. Now, some of the big differences here are showing up in, again, freedom, okay? Now, you have the serfs. I'm gonna put under the serfs some things that are specific to the serf, okay? They cannot leave the manor, we define the manor in a minute, without permission of the Lord. Okay, so that's an important thing. In other words, they are in bondage. They're bound to the land. Okay, so they're sort of like slaves, but not exactly. And as we talk a little more, it might clarify a little more.
Is that where the term landlord comes from? So it's like,
Yes, as a matter of fact, it is. This is where the term landlord comes from. You have the lord of the manor, and when you have people living in his manor, and we're going to define manor in a minute, but you have people living on the lord's property, supposedly for the most part, according to the Frankish tradition especially, which spread. But you're going to have this lord, and he's going to require things from the people that live on his land. When you today, take it to today, you have a landlord, you're renting usually, right? You're paying them money. Well, back then, you would pay the landlord or the lord of the manor, you would pay them by doing work. Or you would pay them by some sort of we're going to talk about what the serfs have to do, is they have to give him a certain amount of what they have actually farmed. And it goes to the lord. You're going to have the peasants of all sorts, the freemen and the serfs, that are going to be required to tithe to the village church. You're going to have the townspeople, they're going to actually have to do work on the land in the towns for the Lord. So yeah, landlord, that's exactly where it came from, even though the meaning has changed to something a lot simpler when it comes just down to money. But yeah, exactly. Now they can't leave the manor without the permission of the Lord. They can't get married without permission. I'm just going to put without permission, okay? And if they run away, they can be returned because they're in bondage.
Yeah, it sounds very like slavery.
It is, but I'm going to give you a couple of ways how, it's a little bit different from slavery. Now, just a little, not too much, but a little. Now, the free men, again, they're going to own some land. They're going to own their own property, so they're doing the same thing, but they have the freedoms. They can leave, they can come and go if they want to. They can get married, they can go wherever they want to. Now, again, the townspeople, what they're going to have is they're going to have some obligations. They're going to have to work in the town and surrounding areas. In other words, things like clearing brush. Okay, things like just regular, let's just put it under maintenance. Just maintenance of the area around the town and in the town. Okay, they're doing all of this for the Lord. So let's talk about the lords then for a minute. So we've kind of got this drawn out here. You can kind of see the groups, okay, peasants, townspeople. These guys are commoners, okay? They're all, one form or another, they're under, in terms of hierarchy, under the nobles. The lords, the vassals, and all the other things we're going to talk about here are members of the nobility. So let's talk about some of that in a little bit more detail. Now, turn this way. Let's talk about a couple of definitions. First of all, manor. Manor is probably not what you think it is unless you already have studied this or you know something about the medieval manor. A manor is not a house, okay? You may be thinking of a mansion. You may be thinking of old United States plantations or something possibly. I don't know. But what a manor means during this time period, a manor is going to be the area controlled by a lord. Hence the term Lord of the Manor. Okay, the Lord of the Manor. This is going to be a powerful noble. He's going to have local control, remember. The put it another way, the government is local. The government is basically the Lord. He can even mint his own money. He can make his own laws. He can put people on trial. He can put them to death. He's like a little king almost, okay? So the manor itself is going to consist of, okay, it's the area controlled by the Lord, but what's in a manor? Okay, a manor is going to have, let's see, how can we make these elements pretty clear? Okay, manor is going to be made up of meadows, pastures, forest, okay, etc. Some sort of cultivated land where you can grow crops. So you have your meadows, pastures, forests, you have all of that natural stuff. You have cultivated land, that's of course for the farmers. You're going to have a village or more under your control of the manor, okay? Because the Lord, he's not just going to control this little area out here, I don't know, where there's a bunch of farmers living. He's going to control a village or several villages or towns. Okay? For example, if you go and you get really technical about it and you look up, say, William the Conqueror. When William the Conqueror becomes King of England in 1066 at the Battle of Hastings, William the Conqueror is going to be the chief feudal lord. And so he's going to technically control all of the land in England. Okay, according to old Frankish tradition, because he was from France, right? So you're going to have the problem with the kings, the fact that they can't really enforce that power, but technically, okay, the feudal lords are going to be in control of these huge areas. Now, in William the Conqueror, in his case, if he's the feudal lord of all of England, then he's going to have all of these cities and all of these towns and all of these, whatever, all of these areas, all of that. Now, you break it down, though, usually into smaller areas. That's, again, the local control. This is where you actually have the power. It's not that king up there with the technical name. It's the guys that you can see, that you can go to and ride to see them, usually within a day or two by horseback, right? So it's going to consist of a village or many villages, depending on your power structure. It may also include lesser manors. Uh-oh, that's weird, huh? Again, sub-infeudation. You're a lord. You have a guy under you. He's also a lord to other people. He's going to have his own manor. But your manor, if you're more powerful, could include his manor and his manor and his manor. So who has the final say? That guy. Okay? This is not an easy thing, and it's also over 1,000 years that it lasts. So let's not get too deep in the weeds with it, because it'll kill us all. It's not particularly, I don't know, it's not particularly hard if you were living then, because you would know your place. But it's particularly hard for us because, as I said, it depends on where you are, it depends on when you are, it depends on if your local lord is a benevolent guy or if he's kind of a tyrannical guy. So over there first. Yeah.
So does the king just grant the Lord's land and the Lords go?
In the beginning, yeah, we're going to talk about that too. We're going to talk about the concept of the benefice and the fief. And that's, yeah, I mean, and then the Lord, I'm going to make a note to do that here in just a second when we're doing our hang on. When we're doing our kind of our vocabulary stuff like manor, we need to make sure we hit that really hard because that's an old Frankish tradition. Remember the concept of the king owns the land and he's letting you live on his land? That was a Frankish thing. It spreads a little further. And that's where we have the concept then too of lord of the manor. And again, 1,000 years they're going to have this. Some places you're not going to end up with the ends of feudalism, the vestiges of feudalism are not going to be cut and tied up and thrown away until the 1880s in places like Russia, the Eastern Bloc areas, Eastern Germany, for example. Yeah.
Do we have like counts or like?
Yeah, and that's, some of those are going to get very specific. We don't even get into all that because you're going to go, like, for example, you're going to have different names. Like if you go to Great Britain and you go into a certain time period in Great Britain, you're going to have the barons and the earls and the counts and all of that. That's very specific over there.
Okay.
You're going to have like the villeins or whatever. These are going to be your free men or your yeoman farmers type of groups. So yeah, there's going to be different titles for them everywhere. So we try to just, at least most of us, when we teach this, we try to do it, like I said, with the broad brush strokes like we talked about, early 21st century college students. You're talking about 1,000 years worth of stuff here. So yeah, you're gonna have different names for it, you're gonna have different rankings, they're gonna get really complicated in some areas. Some areas it's gonna be a lot less, troublesome for you as an individual. But one thing that is for certain when it comes to feudalism is you know your place. You know that there's certain clothing you can't wear, there's certain clothing you must wear. There's certain people that you can talk to, there's certain people that you're going to be, subordinate to, and so on and so forth. So anyway, the manor is also then made up of what's called the domain. This is going to be the area of the manor worked for, not by, but for the Lord. Okay, this is going to be maybe a quarter of the cultivated land, somewhere maybe 1/3 to 1/4 of the land that's cultivated is going to be cultivated for the Lord. So in other words, you're going to have these guys. You're going to have your free men and your serfs. They're out there working part of the week for the Lord. So out of a 6-day week, so you're going to have a 6-day work week. If you're going to be a townsperson, you're going to be a peasant, all of these guys, except for the higher nobility, because they don't really work, okay? It's part of being a gentleman, is you don't have to work. You have these people doing your work for you. But you're going to have, for example, your farmers. They're going to spend 1 day a week to maybe 3 days a week working on the domain. Depending on what type of leadership you have and how much time they want you to put in. And then the rest of whatever time you have left from your 6 days, because you're expected to rest on Sunday, whatever time you have left, you work on your land, okay? So these farmers, again, that includes the free men. The free men, they're living in the Lord's territory, even if they own some land there, they still have to contribute for protection, all right? Now, okay, the townspeople are going to have a similar expectation, a little bit less. Let me tell you one really good thing about being a commoner, okay? Commoners do not serve any sort of military duty. Okay, remember we talked about that with the Greeks and the Romans and so on. Throughout much of history, it's always been this honor to serve in the military. Well, during feudalism, in most times, in most places, the commoners are not going to be allowed to fight, to take up arms and fight for their lord. That's going to be an honor that's reserved for these guys. Now, let's get into some of this stuff. Get a little bit in the weeds, but not too far in the weeds, okay? Getting into the nobility. Nobility. Okay, the nobles, we've talked about, the lords, vassals, and so on. Okay, so let's talk about a definition or two, benefice and fief. They're basically the same thing. Okay, here's how it goes. I'm going to try to write down a lot of this because I know to some of you this stuff's fairly new, okay? Or you've heard it different ways because there's a million different ways to say it. So, and don't on the test, don't go Google this stuff. Like I told you, you'll fall into a rabbit hole you will never be able to escape out of if you try to Google this stuff and answer a test, okay? So anyway, a benefice or a fief. This is land that is granted by a lord to a vassal, okay? Now, in return, I'm underlining kind of vocabulary stuff, in return for fealty. All right, now bring out the red pen, okay? The nobles are the ones dealing with this, it's the nobility. So the commoners, we're not going to deal with that. If we're farmers, we don't worry about things like this, okay? This is not in our world, really. So if you're a lord, you have this assumed control over this certain territory. Now, where did you originally get it? Probably from the king. At some point, maybe you, your father, your grandfather, depending on when and where and how far back it goes, granted someone, some man in your family, some land. Now, what he did then, he granted you this land and made you a vassal. Now, the concept of vassalage, okay, this is a really important concept. This is at the heart of feudalism. The concept of vassalage is where you have a member of the nobility who takes the vow of fealty, which is, again, one of our words. It is much more than loyalty. The oath of fealty is, I'm not going to write every word of this one down because it's too long. The oath of fealty, basically, we mentioned this last time, is where you are going to swear that you will do nothing to hurt your Lord. You will always stand up for your Lord. You will fight for your Lord. You will take up for this guy, because what's he doing for you? He's giving you land, and he's also going to give you protection, okay? So the Lord, that's one of his obligations, is going to be to give you, the vassal, protection. So it's more than just loyalty. You will do what the Lord says. If the Lord says, you know, there's this guy in my manor who I believe has broken one of my laws. I need you to come and serve on a, quote, jury, and we're going to see if he's guilty, then you have to come, okay? You have to. That's part of your oath. If the Lord says that he wants you to become a mounted warrior, in other words, a knight, that's part of your oath of fealty. That's part of serving as a vassal. Okay, now again, the concept of a knight, that's going to change. Don't try to pin that down. Okay, what is a knight and blah, blah, Lord, you'll get so deep there, you'll never find your way out too. The concept of a knight started out as just a mounted warrior, okay? You had a horse, you'd ride on horseback, and you would go and you would fight for and with the Lord, okay? For his, whatever it was, whether the Lord's being attacked or whether he's invading somewhere else, you've sworn that you'll stand up with the Lord, and part of that involves military duty, okay? So fealty, you get, in return for your loyalty and your fealty and all of this vow, you get land to live on. Now, what if your vassal, or you are a vassal, or what if the vassal dies, okay? So here's where we get into a couple of the other things. Now, again, they are going to evolve over the years. It starts out as very, it was very loose, the obligations that you had. But imagine, again, over 1,000 years, how much is going to change. Depends on where you are, depends on who you are, it depends on what place you're living in, your German states, is it England, is it wherever. So let's say the vassal dies. Okay, if the vassal dies, then what's the Lord going to do? Okay, Lord's obligations do not end at death. Okay, once that vassal has sworn his life's loyalty to you in every possible way, and he dies, then as the Lord, you have to step up. And you have to, first of all, take care of the widow and the children. Okay, so I'm going to put over here the widow and any children. Now this, I'm not going to write all this down, but you want to make sure you understand this. If a vassal dies, whether it's in battle or not, okay, this is a guy who was loyal to you during his lifetime. The Lord is going to have the responsibility of, let's say the widow is fairly young, okay? Maybe she's still in childbearing years. The Lord's obligation there will be to find her a new husband. Women aren't living on their own, okay? That's not going to happen until very modern times. He's going to find her a new husband, okay? Now, what if she's past childbearing years? Maybe another guy doesn't want to marry her. She can't have more children. He might be able to find her a husband. Maybe, a husband who has some children that, he's lost his first wife, and maybe he wants another wife to come in and take care of his kids. Possible. But what if he can't find a husband for her? Well, the Lord's obligation could extend, and often did extend, to having to move her in with himself and his family. Because your widows, you just couldn't let them not be taken care of. Usually they would always try to find them a husband and so on, but what if they couldn't? Well, they couldn't. Now, what about though, there's some weird situations, and I'll guarantee you, anything that's popped into your head or my head, anytime we're thinking, especially with feudalism, could this have, yes. Did they ever? Yes. Will they, would it? Yes. Anything you can think of, they did, okay? Guarantee it happened somewhere at some point. Because here's an example of one of the things that happens sometimes. Okay, you've got a widow who dies, and she's got young kids. Well, the Lord goes, finds her a husband, everything's good. But you have a widow that dies, and she's got a kid, maybe the age of Zach, maybe a 11-year-old or something, maybe 12-year-old son. Now, at that point, the Lord has a choice. The Lord can either find her a husband, or he might allow her and her son, and maybe other children, to live on that land. Her husband had already sworn to fealty, had already got this benefits, got this land, until the young boy grows up to the age where he can actually take the vow himself. Okay? So, you have a 12-year-old, it's medieval times, people die younger. His age of accountability, maybe 15. You see kings that'll stand up when they're put into power. Say Louis XIV was 5 years old when he became king in 1643. And when he became a certain age, he decided that hey, it's time for me to take over now. Okay? So, same type of concept. It's not the ancient, but it's medieval, even better. It's medieval times. So that little boy, the Lord might just watch them for a while, take care of them, feed them, comfort them, do all of that. And then when the young man grows to a certain age, he would have the opportunity to take over that land and become a vassal, just like his father. Wouldn't automatically happen because it's all based on a ceremony where they're going to go through all the process of you get the land and you swear the oath and you kneel down and you get blessed and so on. It brings together, like I mentioned earlier, it brings together the Germanic things, it brings together Frankish customs and some of the Christian customs, the concept of being blessed and so on. Okay? So the Lord's obligations are quite large. Now what about let's say the daughters, okay, left behind daughters, he's also then the Lord's going to have to take the position of the father and find a husband for all the daughters in the event that he's unable to marry off the widow and that type of thing. What about the vassal? Now the vassal's obligations, we've talked about their obligations and we've talked kind of about their rights. Now does everybody understand that this concept of feudalism, this concept is going to be a two-way street, okay? You're going to have someone giving something in return for something, okay? Something, you're giving something, you're giving your loyalty in return for land, in that case, in the case of the nobility. What about these guys? Well, that's slightly different down here. These guys, again, they're lucky in a way that they don't have to go into the military service, they don't have to go and serve as a mounted warrior or whatever. And again, a knight, that's going to evolve so much. I mean, if all you've ever done is watch Heath Ledger and it's A Knight's Life, you've got just a snapshot of a little tiny picture of a, different look at that. But it's going to change. It's going to change over time. So let's look at, what about the peasantry? What about the commoners? All right, so commoners. All right, you live on the manor. You live under the lord of the manor. So, if you are a member of, say, the villagers, the townspeople, okay, the villagers, again, I told you they're going to have some work to do. Villagers, townspeople, you're going to do some work for the Lord. We've already established that. What about these serfs, though? What about these free men? A little bit more I want to tell you about them. Now, you said something, Sarah said something about the serfs, this is very much like slavery. Absolutely very much like slavery. But the difference is, say, in American slavery, which was an aberration, American slavery, very different than slavery throughout much of the world, throughout much of history, because in American slavery is based on ethnicity, is based on perpetual slavery through the lineage of the mother, instead of captured people, right? The serfs are kind of this weird in-between thing. Okay, now remember, can't ever forget this part, I've said it a bunch of times, they are bound to the land. They cannot leave the land, they cannot ask permission, or cannot do anything without asking permission. Can't get married. Now wait a minute, why can't they get married without asking the Lord for permission?
They're obligated to them still?
They're obligated, and the Lord might have a wife picked out. It's hard to think about it this way, but the Lord may have someone that he wants that serf to have a family with. He may want to set them up himself, okay? And another problem is if a daughter of a serf, now let me just write it this way. How can a serf become free? Can they? Yes. How can a serf become a free man? Well, he can, okay? A serf can become a free man. First of all, this is why I mentioned the marriage thing again. He can, and this would be the daughter of a serf, or this could be the serf. I'm just going to use it from the male perspective. He could marry a free-born woman. Okay? Everything's based on your family, right? So if he marries a free woman, then he's free. His daughter marries a free man, she's free. Okay? So you can see how that's not going to be good for the Lord, right? Your serf, one of your farmers, one of the guys that's going to give you a portion of his, whatever he grows, he's going to go and just have his own land over there? How's that going to happen? Well, I mean, it's more complicated. He would have to figure out a way to buy his land and all that stuff. So how can he be a free man, marry a free woman? Okay, he could purchase his freedom, just like in American slavery. Happens sometimes. If you haven't seen, I'd say better yet, read the book by Alex Haley called Roots. Roots is a really good movie. It's a better book. Very, very good book, regarding slavery and the family lineage and what the slaves had to go through and so on. One thing that they address in the movie Roots and in the book in even more detail is they talk about how the slaves, the slave owners, the slaves would be hired out sometimes to do things. They would be hired out, and then the owner would get paid, and if the owner was a nice guy, again, American slavery, if the owner was a nice guy, he might allow the slave that he hired out to keep some money. If the slave was able to, he might be able to save up some money and buy his freedom from his owner. Same thing back then. It was a little bit more difficult because of the way that money was sort of absent, but he might be able to purchase his freedom. Now the third one's the weirdest one, I think. Okay, he could run away. Well, wait a minute, I already told you, if they run away, they could be brought back, just like in American slavery. Here's the caveat, okay? Run away to a city or town for a certain period of time, a year and a day. A year, 1 year plus 1 day, okay? So if you're able to run away, if you're a serf and you're bound to the land, to that lord, and you're able to run away to a town and stay there without being caught and returned for a year and a day, you are now considered a free man. Okay, you're no longer bound to that land. Now that's important, especially number 3 there is very important, because when we talk about feudalism, okay, we're talking about a very agrarian culture. Okay, we have our hierarchy and we have all of that, but at the heart of everything are the farmers. They're the ones growing the crops. And what are the nobles doing? Well, the nobles, as you're going to see, are kind of getting bored at some point. The nobles are going to start picking fights with each other, as you're going to see in a few minutes when we start talking here in a minute about chapter 8. It's part of it's going to lead to the Crusades, because the nobility, the guys are bored and they start fighting with each other. So at the heart of everything, we have agriculture. Feudalism is an agrarian culture. Now, if you have the period of time, say the Dark Ages especially, if we're talking about the era from 500 to 1000, we're going to see that I'm just gonna write it as this, just during the Dark Ages, there should be a line, there should be a space in there. The Dark Ages, we're gonna see regression, just like we always have, but we're also going to see towns, cities shrink, okay? We're gonna see people that are going to leave the towns and the cities, and we're gonna have this much more agricultural-based world, based on local government, instead of some king way over there in Paris that I may never see in my lifetime. A local lord is going to be much more palatable. I can depend on him, he's close, okay? We also see during this dark period, we also see that money sort of goes away for the most part. We have it replaced with land, okay? Land becomes the currency. Now again, we're talking broad strokes. I'm not saying, oh, there's no money at all in the Middle Ages. Now don't ever, and that's a big logical fallacy, you know this. Don't ever say all of anything. Don't ever say none of anything. When you take multiple choice tests, always remember that. Always remember that. When you take a multiple choice test, anything where they have those big exclusionary terms, usually it's false, okay? Multiple choice, true and false, or, you know, it's something you can usually say is not going to be accurate. Now, the money sort of goes away. You do have some exceptions. You do have some traders, and that's where you read about Marco Polo in your book. You read about Niccolo and Maffeo Polo. You read about their travels over into China, because you're going to have some guys that are going to keep trade alive. For the most part, trade declines. You have people that are going to resort to bartering again. Okay, I mean, remember, this is after the Roman Empire had been so advanced. Now we've gone backwards again. We're going to people are going to start to resort to bartering, but you're going to have some trade routes that are still going to be open. And they're going to kind of, I don't know, there's going to be this renewal of towns and trade in the 11th and 12th century that we'll talk about when we get there. But some of the trade routes are going to remain open. You're going to have, for example, the Venetian traders. We're going to see some of these Italians from Venice or from Genoa or somewhere. You're going to have Marco Polo and those type of guys. You're going to have a lot of people from the Jewish culture that are going to keep trade routes alive, open, to an extent that during the medieval period, during feudalism, especially the Dark Ages, you're going to see very little trade. You and me, we wouldn't be dealing with that. We would be living our lives day to day, figuring out how we were going to survive day to day, dealing with the Lord, dealing with all the hassles and that type of thing on a very local level, very, very short-sighted thing for us. Now, there's some people who are going to continue to travel and they're going to keep them open. But it's also going to be a time, we're talking about this era right here. Remember, we led into the Dark Ages by talking about invasions. Talked about the Vikings, the Magyars, and the Saracens. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So you had these invaders. You also had famine. Okay. So these are parts of the reason, different parts of the same reason, that trade went away. Okay, you're going to have the Vikings and others, you're going to have all that. And then famine, you're going to have some bad crops, you're going to have some weird weather going on back there. Oh, yeah. So here you've got reasons why the trade routes were going away for most people. The cities were shrinking, people were going back out to the farms, which tells you that when the towns start to return, okay, when the towns and the trade come back, 11th and 12th century, the reasons the towns and the trade come back, okay, when they come back, their renewal is going to be safety. Okay, the invasions have ended for the most part. You're going to have better food supplies, safer food supplies, and that sort of thing. Okay, so the towns and the trades are going to come back eventually, 11th and 12th century. Now, before we get there, then let's talk about some of their innovations. Okay, there's 3 innovations. This is where, please, no matter what you want to do, don't Google this, because I have no idea what you'll get if you try to Google this, not having a clue what you're looking for. Good Lord, I don't know, somebody may just do that just for the heck of it and write it on there so I can look at it and see what's out there, but please don't. Okay, don't. Okay, these are 3 major medieval innovations when it comes to moving things forward. Okay, 3 big technological innovations. Okay, first of all, there's the one that was talked about in your book was going to be the 3-field crop rotation. So let's start with that one. That's mentioned in your textbook. Okay, you had the old way of doing things was this. Here's your land. And you know, if you're a farmer, that if you keep planting crops on that land all the time, then what's going to happen? Keep planting the same crops every season, all the time. Is that going to work for a long time?
No, but that's how the school came in America.
It's part of it, and you're going to have, as far back here as the medieval period, you're going to have people saying, well, we get this thing called soil exhaustion. If you're a farmer, if you know you can ask a farmer about that. Soil exhaustion, which means the soil has to have time to rest. The old way we did this is a little bit easier to show on a whiteboard because I can erase it, but what they would do then is they finally learned that they would let half of their land be used to grow, and the other half would be left fallow for a season. And then they would switch, okay? So they're gonna go back and forth with that. This is the old way. Now, somewhere here in the 10th, 11th, whatever period right here, somewhere here, we've got the new way of thinking. Now, don't hold me to this being just like that. It's supposed to be the same land, okay? The new technique, this 3-field crop rotation, is going to say, well, what if we do this? What if we break it down into 3 sections, and instead of having half of the land completely useless at any one time, how about if we do this? We're going to plant on part of the land, and we're going to plant on part of the land, and we're going to leave 1/3 of it fallow to heal. And then we're going to switch. And then the next season, okay, we'll plant over here, and then we'll let this one sit out, and then we'll switch it, you see? So we're going to have rotation of which part of the land. So what happens is, instead of 1/2 of the land is being just useless, at this point, when they come up with the 3-field crop rotation, only 1/3 of the land is sitting useless at any time, which gives them more food, okay? Now, the 2 other ones. We have at the top up here, the horse collar harness. Now, what we have here is, before the horse collar harness, you had these big beasts of burdens that were pulling the plows. What were those huge, big, clumsy as a what?
Mule.
Clumsy as a who? Ox. Okay. So you had the big oxen. Now the ox, they were actually pulling the plows or whatever, wearing a thing called a yoke. Okay. So you have your ox, you have the yoke. And the problem is, sorry, new phone. Brand new, got it yesterday because the battery in the other one died. But anyway, okay. So the ox had a yoke. Now the yoke's going to fit around the oxen's neck, and they're going to pull the plows and so on. Oxen are not known for being graceful and fast, right? Clumsy as an ox. So what happens is they decide eventually, if we could just let the horses pull the plows, things would be a lot easier. We could go a lot faster. We would have a lot more food because, efficiency. So they put the yoke on the horses, choked the horses. Didn't work for the horses, okay? So what happens here in the middle of, somewhere here in the 10th, 11th centuries, you're going to have the horse collar harness, which is going to allow the the horses to actually have a comfortable way of pulling the plows. Again, effectiveness, efficiency, more food. The second thing is they came up with a new sort of plow called the caruca. The caruca is a heavy plow. And why is that important? Well, there's parts of it, say in northern parts of France, some of the northern parts of Germany. There's areas in Europe, just like there are areas in the United States, some places in Illinois and stuff. There's places where you have black dirt. You have the dark, deep, dense soil. Now, what they had run into is there were places all over the northern part of Europe that it was impossible to plow. So if you can't plow the ground, you can't plant anything. So the caruca is a heavy plow. Now, my goodness, what that does should be obvious. There's all this acreage that we haven't been able to access before because we couldn't turn over, literally, could not turn over that soil. Then now we've got this heavy plow that's able to give us more land. We're going to have more food. So see, the innovations here, these are going to be agricultural. It's going to give people more food. It's going to give people better choices of food. And it's going to be, it's almost going to be this, revolution in agriculture during the late, during the late dark ages as we're coming kind of out of that. Okay, this is part of what propels us forward too. This is part of what brings the towns and the cities back because we're going to have more food, easier access to food, all of that. Now the trade and the towns, when the trade and the towns come back, again, what you can do is you can look, there's more information in your textbook about the town charters and how they're eventually going to become independent from the lords. And we talked about that when I gave you what you needed to know from the study guide. But what's ultimately going to happen is you're going to see the towns come back. You're going to see there's certain places, there was a town in France that was very small during the Dark Ages. It used to be a pretty good sized town, and then it shrank as people just went away and so on. And then during the 1200s, the people came back and that town started to grow, and it ended up within a couple of generations, it had grown to 5 times where it was before the renewal of towns. So why this renewal of towns and trade? Again, okay, the end of the Viking invasions and so on, which leads to a more stable government, more stability just for people in general. Okay, you don't want to go live in this big town with a whole bunch of people if you don't know what's controlling them. It's dangerous. You're in there with a bunch of strangers, right? So there's more stable government, so they start to trust the government a little bit more. You're going to have better food, as we talked about, and more food, which means you're going to have a little bit longer life. Or lifespan is what I was trying to write there. You have a little bit of a longer lifespan. So once we end the Viking invasions and the Saracens and so on, then these people, the men from the north, the Norsemen and so on, they've kind of assimilated into the different cultures. And as we do this, we start to see people return to the towns. Now, you see a new class that evolves here. Okay, this new class, the merchant class, the merchants are the guys who make the towns. And this is why I said it's important that you know the serfs are able, if they run away for a year and a day, they're able to be free. Because in the towns, you're going to need people who are going to be able to settle the towns and make them bigger and build them up again. And that's going to be the merchants. Now, these guys, they started out as, at least many of them, escaped serfs. These are going to be quick talkers. They're good with languages. They're good with rhetoric. They're good at sales. They're the fast-talking salesmen. They're going to be actually giving you, they're going to give you a lot of false information. Trying to sell you things. The merchants are going to be the guys who are able to survive. They're able to adapt. Again, a lot of them started out as escaped serfs, not all of them, but they are gonna all be quick talkers. They're all gonna be adaptable. Now, the merchant class, again, they're going to make the towns because they started out, a lot of these guys who had escaped, they were fast talking their way across different territories. Finally, about the 12th century, they start to settle down, and instead of taking their wares, whatever it is that they want to sell, instead of them going out to you, they're going to give us really the first actual stores in history, okay? That's going to make the towns, okay? This class is going to be called the bourgeoisie. Left out my R, bourgeoisie. Okay, this means the middle class. And they are intrinsically tied to the merchant class. These are basically the city dwellers. Okay, now, the bourgeoisie, the middle class, they're the ones who are going to give us this new urban and urban-like culture that's coming back. And the merchant class, again, brand new, because here's the main, and you gotta remember this, okay? This is the first social class in medieval times that is not dependent on land. These guys are going to come into the town. Some of them they're going to rent. So you're going to start to see that concept of landlord, literally. Okay, they're going to rent. They're not necessarily going to own land. They're not necessarily going to own the business that they have. A lot of them do. A lot of them are going to own, especially as time goes by. A lot of them are going to own the building where they sell their wares. A lot of them are going to live in that same building. Okay, going to have their apprentices coming to that same building, teaching them the trade, or teaching them the skills to be a merchant, that type of thing. Okay, so we've got the merchant class, brand new class. Now, this is where we kind of get into chapter 8, which is really, chapter 8 doesn't take very long. Chapter 8 is the church in the high Middle Ages. So by this point, we've got the towns coming back, and with church, there's a lot of things going on. We're not going to get every single thing, but we are going to, I am going to expect you to read about the church. But what I want to tell you about first is the lay investiture controversy. So in order to do that, we have to go back and give you again a couple of definitions. Okay, simony. I mentioned that in your study guide. Simony, the purchasing of church, meaning the Roman Catholic Church, offices. Okay, remember it came from Simon Magus, from the story in the Bible, in the book of Acts, where this guy Simon Magus, Simon the magician, tried to buy the apostles, what he called magical powers. Sell me your magical powers or whatever, okay? Then we have the concept of laymen. Today, politically correct, we say lay people, but pretty much we're talking about men at this time, so I'm just going to go with it. Laymen. These are men in powerful positions in the church. I'm going to say powerful church positions, who are not ordained in the church. In other words, they're not ministers, they're not clergy. Okay, they're not clergy, they're just regular guys. You see this usually in the nobles. Okay, these are usually nobility. These are guys that have some potential either to make more money, gain more power, of course. But what we're going to see is that these lay rulers in many class, these lay men, these men who are not in positions as clergy, they start to actually sell, look at that, simony, they start to sell church offices to the highest bidder. Now what that does is, in that case, you've got people, say you've got bishops, for example. I'm going to say bishops, etc., clergy, okay, who are getting their position, getting their power in the church from secular, just your plain old worldly guys. Not the church, okay? Wow, you're getting appointed to be Archbishop of wherever, Archbishop of Germany, by some guy over here in the German states who is the Holy Roman Emperor. And he may not even be a member of the Catholic Church. He may not know the theology. He may not care. He wants you to be the bishop because you know what you did? You paid him money, okay? They're going to sell a lot of these positions to the highest bidder. Why do I want to be a bishop? Well, I want to be a bishop because I can gain power. I can actually make some money off that. That's where the Roman Catholic Church really starts getting into some trouble again with the people. Okay, now, last little part here that we're going to do for today, so we still got time to pretty much do most of this, is this results in what we call the lay investiture controversy. And a lay investiture controversy is going to be basically, I mean, we're going to narrow this down to something really simple. What we're going to have is a power struggle between church, Roman Catholic Church, and government. We thought that was a new thing, didn't we? Oh, it's always been, one form or another, the religion, the government, no matter what religion, no matter what government, okay? So what we have here is we have Pope Gregory in 1075. Okay, you have a pope, in this case, Gregory. Which one is he? I want to say he's the seventh. Yeah, seventh. Okay, Pope Gregory is going to issue something that I also mentioned in your study guide. He's going to issue the Dictatus Papae. This is on page 213 in your textbook. So you can look that up. Because basically what it says, and the Dictatus Papae just literally means the words, the dictations, the proclamations of the Pope. Basically says the Pope is the only one whose feet are to be kissed by all princes, that he may depose emperors, that he himself may be judged by no one. The Pope may absolve subjects of unjust men from their fealty. Okay, so you have any arguments, you have any problems about anything, you can go to the Pope, okay? And the Pope is basically saying that he's the only one who is going to have that power. Now, this is an issue, okay? Because we have over here the Holy Roman Emperor. Give me give me 2 minutes and we'll be done with this for now. Holy Roman Emperor, German Emperor, of course, Henry IV, okay? Now, Henry IV likes to give his positions out. He likes to appoint bishops. He likes to appoint powerful men to the church because they owe him something. Now, what he does is when the Pope actually forbids lay investiture, the Pope forbids, in other words, any non-cleric, in other words, any layman, from making, church appointments. In other words, being, unethical about it. Okay, what the Pope does is he has now caused the Holy Roman Emperor, Henry IV, to look at what he's doing and say, oh man, the Pope is cutting into my power, my money, my, really my livelihood. So Henry IV declares that he is going to continue. Again, this is on page 213 through maybe 216. But Henry IV, Roman Emperor, refuses to stop appointing bishops, to stop appointing clergy. in his territory, the German states. He is excommunicated, which means that he is sentenced to hell. Keep that in mind, okay? You're kicked out of the church according to the Pope. You're not a Catholic. You're going to hell. What is he going to do? Well, that's when we come back next time, okay? We're gonna see what happens. Now, if you want to see your exam, if you were one of the ones I said that I actually have graded, you can see those. If you're one of the ones who I have not graded yet, you can hang around for a few minutes and I'll go ahead and let you see them. It doesn't take long to grade them. Okay, so I'm gonna organize if you actually have to watch this. I'm about to end it now.